Hi, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. As Ryan said, I'm the Chief Security Officer here, and you might wonder what I'm doing here talking about testing. But I don't need to convince any of you or all of you of the importance of security when it comes to the financial services vertical. Security in general has been growing as a discipline throughout for the last 15 or 20 years. I've been doing security for longer than that, so I've kind of lived that. But it for sure is developing in many, many ways. And I want to spend some time talking about some of the elements that are involved, some of the considerations that need to be undertaken and so on, leveraging cloud services and so on, and generally making sure that you have the right security elements in place. Certainly things to consider. So again, one of the fortunate things that we have at Sauce Labs is that we have quite a number of financial services customers and banks in particular. Reasons for this are they're not a secret by any stretch of the imagination. Is that banks want to make sure that things work. They want to make sure that the experiences are positive for their customers. They want to make sure that all the information is being contained in the right ways and treated in the right ways. Because of course, you know, the promise of banking is leveraging all of our money so that we can make more, and we can transfer it into other currencies, and we can make investments and do all those sorts of things and you have to have a level of trust in order to be able to deliver against those promises. So in my view, security is very important in building trust. In fact, it's one of the foundational elements of any security relationship, if you like, is that you have an element of trust in the other people that are involved in that relationship. That should also be the same for the artifacts that you use, the applications you leverage, the environments you leverage in order to be able to deliver services, and so on. And so we spend a lot of time and energy focused on our financial services customers and banks in particular, so that we can continue to build that trust and to provide this level of confidence that we need to have in our digital platforms. Sauce Labs' purpose is, of course, to create a world of digital confidence. This is our, if I can follow up with the French, this is our raison d'être. We are here in order to allow you to be able to build that confidence in the things that you're about to launch, the things that you're about to rely upon to be able to deliver your business and grow and flourish. So that by allowing you to test these things and be able to provide you with positive signals and the continuous improvement elements, so that you can make sure that you're delivering it correctly. Excuse me. I was asked a little while ago. So I mentioned I've been doing security for a long time. People were saying, well, yeah, security, okay, but what are you doing talking about test? I think more than 20 years of being a security person makes me a pretty experienced tester, because that's one of the foundational elements of any security initiative is, we all have assumptions on how things work. We expect certain things when we kick off certain routines or implement various things. We expect certain results, and those expectations are oftentimes wrong, or assumptions are oftentimes wrong. And there are situations where you can abuse the situation to invalidate whatever it is that you think you were expecting to occur. So I've spent more than 2 decades poking at things to try and make them do things that they're not meant to do, and to make them fail, and to make them fail in a way that might be as an advantage for me when I'm masquerading as an attacker. So test is something that's been very, very close to my heart over the years, and so it's I suppose how shall I put it? It's fate, I suppose, that has me here, given the amount of testing that I've done over the years. So some of the things I'm going to cover, specific measures that have led financial firms to adopt cloud and to use testing in the cloud. There are lots of considerations in place, and there are tons and tons of companies that have built their own grids, their own testing grids, and so on. But cloud is inevitable. It's one of these things that, again, having done this for a while, we didn't have cloud when I first started doing this. So I watched the various journeys to the cloud of various companies in various industries, and it's really, really interesting to see how much that market has matured and how much organizations have begun to adopt cloud, and now it's part of our DNA now. It would be, if you were to walk away from cloud, it would be quite a difficult proposition for almost everybody. I'm going to talk in particular about one of our customers, without naming them, a top 5 US bank, and how we've grown with them. They've been a customer for many years. So how we've grown and how we've developed and how we've matured in many ways, and sort of shaped ourselves so that we're able to be able to grow with that customer and be able to provide all of the things that they want to provide, and obviously continue to do so. And then talk a little bit about trends, about where things are going. Obviously, I'm not a product guy, but there are some inevitabilities, if you like, of this industry and where things are going. So I think we'll talk a little bit about those and sort of what the security angle might be in those particular areas. So lots of organizations, can we move to the cloud? Again, this question was a difficult question for a lot of people over the years, because everybody's concerned about, giving something up or not being able to leverage the amount of control that they have today and so on. And there was a survey carried out last year by one of the big 4 firms, and I didn't quote it directly, but I just sort of pulled the bullets out of there. And the top concerns for organizations, and I think it was directed at financial services and healthcare firms, were the major concerns had nothing to do with costs and had nothing to do with leaving data centers and going into cloud and operational elements like that. They were around a perceived loss of control, about security and about privacy. So obviously there is an element of a perceived loss of control around, if you currently run applications and you run your infrastructure inside of your own data centers, there's an element of a sort of a comfort, if you like, because you designed that infrastructure, you built it, it's tactile, you can touch it and feel it, you know how it works. The downside of an environment such as that is that it has the vintage of the year that you built it. So let's say you have a 10-year-old data center, which is not uncommon at all. If you have a 10-year-old data center, you've basically paid for it, apart from the hosting charges for all the hardware and so on, you've fully depreciated. But that's something that you designed based on your thinking around security at that time. 10 years ago was a really, really long time ago from a security perspective. So that infrastructure that you've got built there is actually, everything that's running in that environment is predicated on the design of your security program at that time. So you installed firewalls and you installed various other security technologies, and you made decisions from an architecture standpoint. What's going to be allowed, what's not going to be allowed. And those things were done, again, 10 years ago. And because the environment is physical, changing those environments in dramatic ways is difficult. And again, if you look at technology 10 years ago and then the technology that we're leveraging today, some of the technology we're using today wasn't thought of or wasn't practical, or in many cases wasn't possible 10 years ago. So you weren't designing for those sorts of things. And so some of the security posture, if you like, has become antiquated. And so this perceived loss of control is that, you believe and you've got a level of trust in that environment that you built, and maybe it's served you very, very well over the years. And then taking something and moving it outside of that environment and putting it in another cloud that's run by somebody else that you've got a certain amount of control over, perhaps, but not an awful lot, not as much as you have in your own data center. That's a difficult proposition for most folks. So they view it as being risky. The fact is that the security of the cloud environment, or the security of the environment of the provider that you're using, is likely better and much improved and much more modern than your own infrastructure that you built. Maybe it was only 5 years ago. The cloud environments are still better because they're much more nimble, and those vendors, those service providers, spend an awful lot of time and energy making sure that they're flexible and they're up to date. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So the security element is kind of an interesting one, because I think that in many cases, service providers are focused on securing their platform, which is possibly only delivering one thing for you. In the example of a SaaS provider, my team at SauceLabs only has to secure our environment. I don't have to worry about the other 100 SaaS apps that you might be using in your environment. I just have to make sure that mine is as secure as it can possibly be, and I have a team fully focused on that, so that you don't have to worry about those sorts of things. The privacy element is kind of an interesting one because obviously we've got a lot of healthcare customers as well, and financial services customers obviously don't want any information leaking where it shouldn't. And then there's been lots of legislation lately on data sovereignty elements that are popping up around what you're allowed to do with certain data, whether it can move from here to there, what people are allowed to know about the data that you have, and various other things. So there are lots of privacy elements, but I think they're related to the first two. Privacy is obviously built on a foundation of security. If you don't have security, you can't execute against a privacy initiative. So it's built on top, and I think it's just sort of layered on as another element where people are concerned. And so that's an area where I think obviously there's an awful lot of consternation, if you like. So that is not my slide. Oh, it is. I'm sorry. So you've got these silos of quality signals that makes risk mitigation pretty difficult. So security is a risk, right? And I think that when you have an environment where you've got lots and lots of tools and lots of workflows and so on involved inside of continuous integration, it gets really, really busy. So as you can see, you've got dev and integration, and you've got production, you've got a testing, all of those environments. And you've got all of the various tools that you can use, including ours, across all of these various integration pipelines and testing initiatives and so on. And so you start to see the amount of crosstalk that occurs, the crosstalk that occurs between all of these tools and throughout all of these environments, and it looks pretty busy, right? And to me, this looks really busy. I'm probably describing something to all of you that looks like it makes sense, looks like it's normal. When I look at something like this and I consider what these things are like, I think to myself, good luck securing that. How am I going to not only get security testing built into my various initiatives and so on, but all of these tools and all of this crosstalk and all of these repositories of information and so on, where is it all going? Where is it all stored? How am I going to be able to track it? How am I going to be able to secure this information inside of my environment? Because I need to know where all the data goes. Because of complying with various things like privacy initiatives and security programs and other compliance initiatives, I need to understand where everything is going and who has access to it and in what state it is, and various other things. So, securing this is a difficult proposition. So this looks a lot easier to solve, right? Something where you have continuous integration across the three platforms, and you've got the various testing that occurs in various stages and so on, and you're constantly learning from the signals you get from your environment and providing insights that you can continually apply. And so this is a much, much easier and flexible way of looking across tests and making sure that you're being efficient in everything that you can do. This I can secure, right? Just comparing it to the last diagram. This is something that I can wrap a security program around and get my head around it very, very quickly. The previous one's a lot more difficult and a lot more expensive. So why do we move to cloud? This is all easily understood, and you've already considered most of this. A lot of people talk about cost, which for sure is one of the major initial uptakes that you get from moving into a cloud environment. If you don't have to build a data center and buy all the hardware, yes, it's cheaper to move to the cloud. And then there's a sort of a tailing off point in the curve at some point long in the future. But closer proximity to users, lower latency, increased redundancy and resilience, increase in response times, all of these things are well understood. And the things that we've come to expect. We expect multiple nines of uptime. We expect our applications to work and for them to be pretty snappy when we leverage them. That being said, a certain amount of latency is built into every SaaS tool because in the days when we deployed our own tools inside our own data centers, they were much snappier. There's nothing faster than deploying something inside of your own data center. It's faster to do that than it is in the cloud. So performance can be an interesting metric to consider. However, on balance, when you look at things like resiliency and being closer to your users and so on, cloud's obviously a much more flexible environment to be in as opposed to building multiple data centers. There are security benefits as well, right? There's lots of automation that you can build in. Less humans means less errors, as long as the automation's been built in the right ways. You're getting up-to-date security controls, especially when compliance initiatives are involved. You're getting up-to-date software, using modern encryption and various other things. And then the most important, I think, is you get a single integration point. If you've got multiple data centers, just think about VPN for most of you. You probably fire up your VPN and have to think about which of the data centers you need to connect to for various reasons. It would be that way if you had multiple data centers. And so, having a single integration point is a great thing to be able to have in a cloud environment. Specifically for banks, and thinking about our customer when I was putting this slide together, what are the benefits there? There's no high tide challenge. We used to have, I've been doing this long enough, where you used to have to engineer for high tide physically, like the amount of servers you built and the amount of throughput you needed and bandwidth and so on. The high volumes that are required by digital banking and e-commerce are immense. And obviously there's busier times, Black Friday, Q4 in general, lots and lots of really busy times from the e-commerce perspective. So you need that sort of elasticity to be able to deal with things like a high tide challenge. You can significantly reduce your costs through outsourcing. A lot of you have centers of excellence inside of your organizations, great things to be able to have, where lots of R&D can occur. You're able to allocate new capacity for them to be able to innovate and grow in whichever ways they choose without having to physically build things. Scaling up and down horizontally and vertically, of course, in real time is a huge benefit. And then as part of that, there's a high expectation of SaaS providers in general around the amount of security that they have built into their environment and the controls that they've leveraged and sort of the discipline around the folks that manage those environments. So our particular customer, I'm going to chat about for a minute here, started off the journey with our customer where they had, in 2016, late 2016, I think it was, when they became a customer, about 2 million transactions. It used to take them about a week to complete, and they had about a 50% failure rate, which is not great. You're going to have to retest an awful lot, and there's an awful lot of care and feeding involved in dealing with an environment such as that. So happily for us, became a customer, grew immediately to 4 million transactions. It's one of those things, right? They probably had a little bit of, restrictive environment in whatever they built themselves, that they may not have had enough flexibility in their environment. So once you move to a cloud environment, you get that flexibility. So they immediately grew to about twice that size, about 589,000 testing minutes per month. Quickly, after about a year, grew to 8 million transactions, so 2x again. And then dramatically increased testing minutes to 59 million a month, which, is a lot of testing minutes, no question about it. Again, another year later, and all the while this is going on, we were growing with this customer, right? They were asking us to do more, to do better, to provide more capacity for them and various other things. And so, it very, very much was a partnership. They also had very stringent security requirements that we had to deal with. And so an awful lot of partnership was involved in being able to get all of those controls in place and satisfy the various compliance initiatives and internal controls that were required by our customer. 2019, 13 million transactions being achieved in 36 hours, 2% failure rate. So the one that jumps out at me there is the massive, going down to 2% in failure rate is a massive improvement. That means you don't have to retest as much. Thereby you can do an awful lot more testing without having to go back and figure out the failures. And then dramatically improving the time it takes for them to be able to, finish the tests. So they could do them over a long weekend, right? There's lots of bank holidays around the world. Over a bank holiday weekend, you could get 13 million transaction tests carried out. And again, an increase in testing minutes per month. And then just recently, and more growth, it's at 85 million testing minutes per month. But the thing that really jumps out at me is the top right of the slide. So, those transactions are now being carried out based on, again, the partnership with this customer and all of the improvements that they were driving us to make, because obviously they wanted to grow. It now takes about 25 minutes to complete those transactions, which is an immense improvement. Meaning that they can really continuously test and gather those signals and gain those insights and move them back through their pipeline and move them forward. And then even better, less than a 1% failure rate. In fact, less than a 0.5% failure rate, which is pretty remarkable. So just an example of us working with a big bank and driving ourselves and holding ourselves to a higher standard, but yet being able to provide them with everything that they needed. This customer is currently our largest customer, and they challenged us, as I said, to accelerate in many, many ways and to mature ourselves in so many ways. They challenged us from a scale perspective, from a security perspective, from a privacy perspective, from a compliance perspective. But all of it was achieved with a deep engagement with the customers. And so it's some of the things I enjoy, is talking to customers and learning about some of the challenges that they have, particularly from a security perspective, and helping them sort of get over whatever the hurdles are inside of their own environment to be able to, adopt cloud services and be able to leverage them, because it really does make an awful lot of difference. And we continue to work closely with them. So I want to talk a little bit about trends. Not too many trends. Again, if I was a product person, I'd be giving you a roadmap and talking about lots of whiz-bang things that are about to occur on the horizon. I'm a, relatively speaking, creative person, but I'm not creative enough to be in product. So there's no question that mobile apps are where everything is already at, and where everything is going. Shift to mobile from a security perspective is really interesting for me, because of course, having grown up in security over the years, we had web apps there for a while. That was where online banking really started and e-commerce started. And security elements, we're trying to manage how we secure and how we manage things like concurrent connections and session management and various other things, and making sure that we're paying attention to those things. And those things, of course, are still super important. As of course, we've over the last probably 8 years, everything's shifted to mobile. I haven't been inside of a bank branch for a few years. So everything I do via either the web or an app. And I haven't actually been to an ATM in this COVID world that we're dealing with at the moment, because cash isn't really being used and transacted an awful lot. So I haven't been to an ATM in a long time, but I do everything via my mobile app. The problem, of course, is if the mobile app you're using isn't that great, it's not that difficult to shift from one bank to another. Just use banking as an example. So those are difficulties if your app doesn't work the way it's expected to work, or if mistakes are made and issues occur. That doesn't drive confidence higher. It actually impacts confidence in a negative way. So it's undeniable that mobile apps are where everything is going. And so for me, that's really interesting, because of course we've got multiple platforms and multiple vendors, and from a security perspective, it's kind of an interesting area. All the while, our users' expectations, your customers' expectations are growing and growing. From a security and a compliance perspective, from accessibility and performance and various other elements, they're becoming less forgiving about the things that we put in front of them. And so we not only have to have confidence in what we're deploying and allowing them to use, their confidence has to be super high that they're going to get the experiences that they expect, and they're becoming more and more discerning. Speaking of discerning, security requirements massively increased, not just from our customers, but from the users, from your users of your apps and your applications and so on. And financial services, I think, along with healthcare, probably become the most discerning of our customers from a security perspective. And so, as I said, I enjoy working in an environment where we have customers that have these types of challenges, because I know there are ways for us to help combat these challenges and to make sure that everybody's experience is a good one, and then we can drive higher and higher digital confidence. And as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. I think as we begin to work with certain customers and we improve ourselves and we improve our ability to deliver testing quicker and with richer signals and with an awful lot less failure rate and with more uptime and more reliability, it helps everybody, right? And tide comes up and every boat goes up. So those are some of the things I wanted to cover. So with that, I'm going to stop. I think we were trying to leave some time for some questions and answers. I'm happy to get involved and answer any questions that anyone might have. And I hope hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you so much, Justin, for walking us through that. If you do have questions, please feel free to post those here in the Zoom chat or on the Slack channel. We'll get to as many as we can. And just to start off, Justin, I was hearing what you were talking about initially about the comparison of the data center versus the cloud and the arguments in favor of both, really, as you think about maybe a data center can feel more secure. However, it's not as flexible, it's not as nimble as a cloud environment. But with the cloud, there's this feeling of maybe a loss of some degree of control. And I'm wondering, I think a number of the attendees on the call today in this event are working in different teams on test and QA, on developer teams, and might be using data centers in their company, but want to convince their leadership to move towards the cloud for all of the reasons that you suggested. What do you think? You're on the executive team. You've, I'm sure, had these different arguments brought to you in the past. What do you think is the most persuasive pitch to bring to someone in saying, we want to make this shift to the cloud. It will be secure for our financial organization.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question, Susie, because it's the piece of advice that I give out all the time. The best possible advice I can give you is to engage your security teams early. Get them involved. If there's something that you do internally, let's say you've got your own test grid or something like that, and a new service comes out, or you want to use Sauce Labs, or you want to start using real device testing and all those sorts of things, because it's prohibitive for you to do it yourself. Is if you signal very, very early that you're going to need the security team's help. If you work at a bank, financial services, and so on, the security people really do have to approve those things before you get to use them. And so involving them early enough gives us all an opportunity to get on the phone or to share the white papers and various information that we have about how these cloud platforms work. I'll go beyond Sauce Labs. Any cloud platform that you want to leverage, there's a lot of data there that you can start to feed to the security team. To again, it's just crazy that it's all about building confidence once again. The security team want to be able to know that how it's described, how it works, is actually how it works. And what is described will occur is actually what will occur. And again, is about building trust and building confidence. So more often than not, I and my team are brought into conversations with customers because they get into the procurement cycle. They're already in love with the product and they want to get going on it, and they've got goals that they want to achieve. And they get into procurement, and then lo and behold, you're stuck in procurement for 6 weeks, because procurement at large companies, it doesn't happen quickly normally. But then an audit team or a security team or a compliance team gets involved in the procurement process and goes, hang on a second, we don't know what this thing is. I've never heard of it before. And so the more you could kind of bring them in and they can begin to understand what it is that you're doing and see that it aligns with a business goal that's important to you, then you sort of build a little bit of pressure in your favor for them to kind of understand what it is that you're trying to do, and then figure out what the tools. And then we can provide you with information around exactly how things work and why your confidence should be high, because of course we've built these tools so that you can use them. So we're trying to make sure that we're providing with the right level of information, and oftentimes just getting on the phone will solve the problem, kind of demystifies the whole thing. But it is an important conversation. But the earliest possible interaction, the earliest opportunity you have to pull in your security team, do that.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that, Justin. And certainly the advice there to involve the stakeholders that are going to be part of that decision from the beginning, making sure that you don't get too far down a path that maybe is in slightly the wrong direction, or the security team doesn't feel involved in how you got there. So there might be significant delays on that.
Security teams don't like surprises. I've never met one. I've built many and have been part of a few. They don't like surprises. And so the more you can sort of bring them in, and this goes for nearly everybody, the more you involve other teams in what it is that you're doing, they feel like they're part of it, as opposed to something where they can kind of say, well, wait a second, that's a surprise. I don't like that too much.
Great. Well, Justin, I'll have to start inviting you to all of my meetings just so you don't feel left out.
I go to most of your meetings already too.
So you talked as well, Justin, about sort of looking to the future trends. trends that are already underway, right? The shift to mobile, the really high user expectation of what their experience will be on a web or mobile app. I wonder how these are, of course, progressing more rapidly because of the time that we're in. Such an increased demand for remote access to everything in light of the COVID pandemic and increasingly a remote world. Are there specific concerns that come up for you, Justin, over the past 6-7 months, how long it's been, in relation to how that shift is going to affect organizations' security stance? We're accelerating towards digital everything.
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night in regards to that shift and security?
Yeah, I think so. An old problem, which still continues to exist, is when we used to do the old waterfall developments, right, where you would do all of the developments, figure out the products, and start building things and knit them all together and everything, and then, and I'm sort of playing to the crowd here, right? Then the QA would happen almost at the very, very, very end, right? When it's too late and launch is like 2 weeks away, and then QA happens. Well, you know what happens after QA? The security review. So there's even less time to do the security review, and it was impossible because you would inevitably find something, and then oftentimes you have to launch anyway because some customer was waiting and somebody said, "Hey, June 15th, we're going live," and so we're going live on June 15th in whatever state that we were in. So I think that was a big challenge around security and testing being done too late. So I think that with the shifting of everything to the left and making sure that we're doing continuous testing, and making sure that we're gathering all the right signals and moving everything in, I think that the faster you move, it makes it more and more difficult to round those corners, right? I think about kids running laps, right? There's like cones for them to run laps, and they're running around at a certain speed, and then you tell them to run faster, and they start to cut corners. They start running on the inside of the cones. We all do that. We all do start cutting corners when you're asked to run faster, and maybe you don't have the energy, or it's toward the end of the race. And so, so there are areas that fall away, and all of the security is an element of quality. All the test pieces we're testing for quality, and so the quality will fall off. And that's one thing that kind of concerns me, because at the rapid pace that we're all moving, it's inevitable that things are going to get missed. I mentioned earlier with our largest customer, we've taken their testing time down from 6 days to 25 minutes. That's rapidly improving, but again, the most important thing was that the error rate also continued to fall. So we have to make sure that we're testing in the right ways to understand that as we move faster and faster and faster, to make sure that error rate doesn't start to climb. And that's something that kind of concerns me, because there are very specific security bugs, but I can take UI bugs and UX bugs and various other things and execute security goals leveraging those bugs. So any lapse in quality is a bad thing. And one of the things where we've begun to see it is apps and websites and various other things beginning to leak information, checking the information that's being consumed by the app or consumed by the website, and making sure that you're not actually reflecting any of that data back, or even reflecting it away from that customer, or potentially leaking in some way, shape, or form. I think those are the sort of the more nuanced testing where I think we need to do an awful lot better job, because when you start doing something faster, you don't do it as well. And so, you can't do it as well for a long time, let's put it that way. So those are the areas where I think, I have some concerns, but I have faith that we're gonna get it right.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense, right? As we're trying to keep up and in some cases play catch up, just based on new demands and increased demands currently, making sure that quality is still important, and really making sure that as we're running faster and maybe thinking about cutting corners, that security does not become a casualty in that speed.
Yeah. Or quality in general. I think it's inevitable once you start moving that you get closer to the corners. You may not cut them, but try and stay on the line as much as possible.
Yeah. So we just have a few minutes left here, and I have one question coming in here for you to close this out. I'll read it out as written, Justin. Question is, do you agree that the vast majority of concerns about security come from the client's inability to properly manage its valuable and confidential information, rather than potential risks of the cloud solution? Are the risks in the management of that information internally, or are there privacy security risks that are primarily with the cloud itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in general, as I said earlier, the cloud providers are held to a higher standard, and they're held to a modern standard, right? We're expected to be able to deliver against modern security frameworks and deliver modern encryption solutions and various other things. It's not okay if your cloud provider is using technology that was, deprecated 15 years ago. It's probably not a good thing. Or old, SSL or, SSL certificates from using a crypto version from 20 years ago or something like that. So we're held to a higher standard. And so I think in general, the cloud platforms are more secure than your own data centers, which again may have been built years ago. And one of the reasons being that your data centers have to be able to run possibly 80, 150 apps. Right? So it has to be a flexible enough environment so that when your users, let's say they VPN into the network, or however you leverage, you provide them with access, all of those things have to be able to work. That's an awful lot of firewall holes that have to be open. That's an awful lot of access you've got to give your end users to be able to hit various things, right? And lots of them talk to each other and are integrated and so on. So with the cloud environment, if you use Sauce Labs, you're using one set of services that we provide for you, and we focus on making sure that that is as tip top as it can possibly be. Same thing with any other cloud service. You might be a Salesforce customer or something like that. They only have to secure Salesforce. Now, Salesforce is a massive company with lots of integrations, but that's their area of focus. They don't have to focus on making sure that everything works. So I do think that the cloud platforms have improved security across the board. That isn't to say that you can't have excellent security inside of your own data center, especially if it's a core principle of your company, particularly in financial services. I know it is. I worked at a bank more than 20 years ago, and I know how important security was back then and continues to be going forward. But I don't want to put the issue at the client's doorstep either. I think that there's an onus on the cloud providers, on the service providers, to make sure that our customers can deploy things in the right ways. There should be conversations about best practices and understand what problem exactly they're trying to solve, what integrations they need to achieve inside of their own environments, because it's our responsibility to help them do those things correctly, because then they get the best value and they get the best possible experience of what it is we want them to consume. So I think we have some further responsibility there to make sure that our customers are supported and that they're successful. Anybody can make mistakes. Anybody can have a bad process. It is more and more critically important that you understand where your important data is, whatever your critical data is inside your organization, intellectual property or customer records or financial or healthcare information. Know where those things are, and don't allow them to go places you don't want them to be, and know what state they're stored in and who has access to them. Probably 15 of the last 20 major breaches were because somebody took a data set and they put it somewhere and there was no security on it. It was supposed to be there for a short time and they forgot about it, and it ended up getting leaked. So knowing where that information is super important. And I think from a testing perspective, using synthetic data for tests, it's not difficult now to create really, really detailed and sophisticated synthetic data. Test with that, and then you don't have to worry about critical data moving around your environment or leaving your environment. You can be much more confident where it is.
Great, thank you, Justin. Yeah, so wherever you're keeping your data, wherever you're running your tests, whether that's on a local grid, a cloud-based platform, know where your data is. I think that's a very strong and simple sort of takeaway, right? Just keep track of it so you can keep it safe.
Your entire security program should be wrapped around understanding what's critical to your business and wrapping your security controls around that, because it's very hard to secure everything. But those things that are most important, that's where you should start.